I want to introduce my colleagues before I start. Tim Freeman, who is our Chief Development Officer. He has a daughter, Eleanor, with Rett syndrome, and he's in charge of our fundraising efforts. And Jennifer Endres. Oh, Tim lives in New Jersey, just out of interest. Jennifer is on the Cape Cod in Massachusetts. She also has a daughter, Jillian, with Rett syndrome, and Jennifer is our family liaison. My name is Monica Coenraads. I live in Connecticut, and I have a 24-year-old daughter that has Rett syndrome. She was diagnosed at the age of 2. And I started first getting involved with Rett syndrome research in 1998, shortly after her diagnosis. I ran the Rett Syndrome Research Foundation for 7 or 8 years, and then started the Rett Syndrome Research Trust in 2008. Shortly after the discovery by Adrian Bird that Rett syndrome is reversible, at least in animal models. And that discovery really lighted a fire for me to really focus on research activities that targeted the root cause of the disease. And that is what Rett Syndrome Research Trust does. So there are 3 reasons why I am optimistic, and my colleagues are, and the scientific community is, that we can actually significantly impact the symptoms of Rett syndrome. And those 3 reasons are, number 1, we know our gene, right? And it's a single gene disorder. So unlike disorders like autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, depression, schizophrenia, all of those are very complicated genetic disorders. Rett syndrome, from a genetics viewpoint, is quite simple: mutations in one gene, and we can attack that gene. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that Rett syndrome is not neurodegenerative. Brain cells don't die. And the third reason is the work that Adrian Bird did, showing that if you can restore levels of the MECP2 protein, the symptoms go away. And so for these 3 reasons, we're optimistic that if we can target the root cause of the disease, we will see improvements in symptoms. So in 2017, we launched Roadmap to a Cure, which was a strategic research plan, 3 years and $33 million. And the goal of the plan was really to identify every possible scientific approach that we could use to increase levels of the MECP2 protein, and then to either launch or expand therapeutic programs within each of those areas. So you can see here the activity that happened during the 3-year timeline of Roadmap to a Cure. And without going into much detail, I think you can see here that there was a lot that happened between that 3-year timeline. And a major reason for that is because there were new technologies that were being discovered that allowed, for example, opportunities to edit the gene or to edit the RNA. And as those new technologies were being discovered, we were able to recruit scientists and labs, and in some cases companies, to become involved, and therefore our roadmap expanded. So the key accomplishments that happened during Roadmap to a Cure, first of all, we were able to raise successfully the $33 million. And Tim will tell you a little bit later where those funds came from. But, you know, simply put, all of the money that we raise at RSRT comes from Rett families and the networks of those families. So really, it's really an example of how powerful Rett families can be when they combine their efforts for a common goal. So we raised the necessary funds, and then we were able to either launch or expand 15 programs in 6 strategic areas. And I'm going to take you through each of these areas in a few minutes. I think the most important thing that happened during the 3 years is that at the beginning of Roadmap, there were 0 companies that had an MECP2 targeted program, and now there are 6. That is a huge, huge change. And for me, who has been doing this type of work now for 22 years, I am really seeing a movement and an interest and activity on the part of biopharma, so biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies with an interest in Rett syndrome now, but not a drug that failed in Alzheimer's or Parkinson's and that's now being tested in Rett syndrome. These are programs that actually attack the root cause of the disease, which I think you need to do in order to see dramatic improvements. So you can see here the companies that now have publicly disclosed Rett syndrome programs, and one of them is still undisclosed. And the reason that we are finally able to get the attention of companies, I think, has to do with a number of things that we've been able to achieve. So when I have conversations with leadership of biopharma companies, they always ask the same questions, and it's usually not about the science right away. The questions that they initially ask are the mouse models freely available? If I were to do a clinical trial in Rett syndrome, what symptoms would I be measuring? And how do I go about measuring those symptoms? And are the tools that are used to measure the symptoms, what does the FDA think about those? Are they validated? Are they sensitive to change? Do you have a biomarker? A biomarker is something that can be identified in blood or urine or spinal fluid that can track with disease severity. If we had a biomarker, it would make clinical trials much more simple. So they want to know, do you have a biomarker effort? Would you be willing to share results with us? Do you have a registry? How many patients are there with all the different mutations? Could I enroll a trial if my company was interested in doing a trial? So there's a lot of questions that they have. And we, over the years, have been able to set up initiatives and efforts so that now when they ask, are the mouse models freely available? Yes, they are. How much do we know about the gene? We've actually amassed a huge amount of foundational knowledge base about the gene. Yes, we have a biomarker effort. Yes, we have we have outcome measure efforts. And so these were projects that, cost a lot of money and were not particularly sexy, but that had to be done. And now those are in place and they're starting to yield results. And I think companies are now viewing Rett syndrome as a scientifically mature disease. And so they're becoming more interested. So on our website, we have other accomplishments that we were able to achieve over the last 3 years. And I'm not going to take your time now to read these, but if you go to our website and you click on the research section and then the accomplishment section, you can take time to go through these on your own. So I think this is a chart that is of particular interest. And again, this is available on our website. This is an MECP2 targeted therapeutic pipeline. So across the top, you'll see the various stages of therapeutic development. And then across the vertical, you see each of the 6 strategies that we are pursuing and the various programs within each of those strategies. And we've shown the academic programs in orange and the industry programs in this purplish magenta color. The dots are where we are now in 2021, and the arrow is where we hope to be in 2024. And so you can see that in the next few years, by 2024, we expect to have a number of clinical trials, all of which are targeting the root cause of the disease. Okay. So this brings us now to the next phase, what comes after Roadmap to a Cure. And we've called that phase Cure 360. And the 360 symbolizes how we are attacking Rett syndrome from every angle. And so here you can see the 6 strategies that were identified and launched during Roadmap to a Cure, and that now will be continued to be pursued during Cure 360. And I'll take you through each one of these. Before I do that, I'll just discuss the goals of Cure 360. So first of all, I'll mention that every possible way that can boost levels of MECP2 is represented by these 6 strategies. There's not something else out there that isn't represented here on this graphic. And if some technology is invented that comes along that enables yet a 7th or 8th way to boost levels of MECP2, then we will pursue that as well. And the goal of Cure 360 over the next several years will be to continue to incubate programs and to help transition those programs to biopharma. Because I think an important key point, discoveries are typically made in academic laboratories, laboratories at universities around the world. But academic researchers are not drug developers. The development of therapeutics happens in the private sector, in industry. And so you need to be able to make that transition from an academic lab to industry. And that is not an easy transition, and it needs to be facilitated. And I think we have done that quite well, actually, with 6 companies now involved, and more to come. There will be more that will be announced, I think, over the next year or 2. Okay, so let's start discussing these 6 strategies. So the first one is gene replacement. So gene replacement is your traditional, what you think of gene therapy. So when you're replacing, adding into the body extra copies of a gene to compensate for a gene that's mutated. We call it gene replacement instead of gene therapy, because you could argue that most of these strategies are one form of gene therapy or another. And so to be more exact in our language, we call this as gene replacement. Okay, so gene replacement should be a one-time therapeutic, one injection that delivers into the brain extra copies of MECP2. You don't have to do anything up to the mutated copy of MECP2, because mutated MECP2 doesn't do anything bad. It just doesn't work. And there are 2 companies that are now pursuing gene replacement programs. One is Novartis. They bought that program basically when they bought Avexis several years ago. And the other company is Taysha. They're a new company that came on the scene last year. Both Novartis and Taysha, both programs were incubated as part of our gene therapy consortium, which RSRT launched in 2014. So Brian Kaspar was it was a four laboratory consortium. The 2 gene therapists were Brian Kaspar and Steve Gray. And that led to the Novartis program and now Taysha. There are differences in the gene therapy construct between these 2 programs. And there are also 2 academic programs. One is Jim Wilson at the University of Pennsylvania, and the other one is Stuart Cobb at the University of Edinburgh. Both of those programs are making progress, and we hope that within a year or so, they will also transition to a company, at which point there will be 4 companies that are pursuing gene therapy. I know you have some questions about Novartis and Taysha, and I'll take all the questions at the end of the presentation. So that's gene replacement. That's a single injection. The Novartis program will be an injection into the spinal fluid. The other programs will likely have different routes of administration. The goal is to get as much gene therapy into the brain as possible, gene product into the brain. Okay, so that's gene replacement. The other one is gene editing. So with gene editing, we're not replacing, we're not adding extra copies, but we're trying to fix the mutations that are in our girls' cells. And we have two different strategies. One of them is called base editing, and that's where we would have to develop a therapeutic for every mutation. This is mutation specific. This work is being done at a company called Beam Therapeutics in Boston, which is made up of some of the leaders in gene editing, and was started by some of the discoverers of CRISPR, which is a technology that's used to edit. And then our other approach is more generic. So the other approach, one therapeutic would work for any mutation, all mutations. And that's called exon editing. And there you would be trying to remove the sections of the protein that have all of the mutations. So that's gene editing. MECP2 reactivation deals with the fact that in females with Rett syndrome, you have one healthy copy of MECP2 and one mutated copy of MECP2. Some cells have the active one. Some cells have the mutated gene that is active, and therefore it's making mutated protein, but a neighboring cell may have the opposite situation where the mutated one is off, and in that cell, it's making healthy protein. And so in our girls, they are making roughly, 50-50. So half of their cells are making the mutated protein, the other half are making the healthy protein. So the goal here is to try to activate the healthy MECP2 in the cells where the mutated one is active. And we started off, when we first started funding research in this area, we were looking for drugs. So something that you would take like in a pill form that could activate the gene. We've now moved away from that approach and we're taking a more biologic approach. And so the goal here is to use something that I've mentioned before, CRISPR, which is a technology. You can synthesize CRISPR guides in a laboratory so that it allows you to deliver certain molecules directly to the part of the genome that you're targeting. So we would be able to target the silent MECP2 and deliver certain, what we call epigenetic modulators that would remove from the silent MECP2 certain chemical tags that are keeping it silent and add other tags that would encourage activation. And so this is an approach that for now remains in the academic setting, but over the last year, I am seeing quite a lot of interest in companies. And so I hope that this is an area that over the course of the next year is going to see the entrance of industry that will now start reactivation programs as part of their pipelines. The other very active field is RNA editing. So I probably should have mentioned this before, but just to think about high school biology that we all took, genes make proteins, but there's an intermediate step where you make RNA. And then the RNA is really a copy of the DNA, but it exits the nucleus and goes to the part of the cell where there's something called a ribosome that is basically the protein factory where the proteins get assembled. And you can intervene either at the DNA level, which is what we're doing with gene replacement, with gene editing, and with MECP2 reactivation, or you can intervene at the RNA level, which is what RNA editing and RNA transplicing. And then you can also intervene at the protein level, which is the final step. So with RNA editing, this is also mutation specific. And we have a number of academic people that we are working with, and there's also now 2 companies involved. One of them is Vico Therapeutics, which is in the Netherlands. This was started by one of our scientist that we've been funding for many, many years, Gail Mandel. She's the scientific founder. And there's another company that recently announced an RNA editing program called Shape Therapeutics. By the way, we've done webinars with both Vico Therapeutics, with Gail, and with Shape. They're on our YouTube channel. And I'd encourage you to watch them because they'll go into more specifics than I'm going to do today. So the RNA editing is also mutation specific. The mutations that are most amenable to editing for the moment are the nonsense mutations. So these are mutations that end in X, 270X, 160X, 255X. The hope is that the companies will be able to move beyond just the nonsense mutations, but for now, that's what they're starting. So these would be therapeutics that would target about 1/3 of the Rett population. And then, by the way, RNA editing is a very active field in biotech right now, and I would not be surprised if there are more companies that announce Rett programs within the next year. And then we have RNA Transplacing. This is being done by Stuart Cobb at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. And this would be a generic approach. So one therapeutic would target all of the mutations in Rett syndrome. And this is also starting to show some progress. We've been funding this for a number of years. This is a, kind of a novel approach. There are no therapeutics at the moment that are in clinical trials for this. So if this moves ahead, Rett syndrome would probably be the first. And then finally, we have protein replacement. And so out of all of the approaches that are the 6 approaches, this is the only one that would have to be given repeatedly. So you would inject protein, that would get degraded over time, and then you would have to do it again. All of the other approaches should be one time, and hopefully that is sustainable throughout the lifetime of our children. Protein replacement to the brain for a diffuse brain disorder like Rett syndrome, meaning we have to get the protein everywhere, is actually challenging. So the question is really, can we get enough protein into the brain, and can we get it to go everywhere? I actually have an update call today, this afternoon, with the laboratory that we're funding. So I will know more about the progress later today. So those are the 6 strategies that we're pursuing. And then we have here at the bottom kind of foundational programs and resources that we are funding, which help all of these approaches move forward, and which are helpful to all of the companies as well. And you can learn more about that on our website. Okay, so I'm happy to take questions now. You can unmute yourselves if you have a question. Philippe, let me just see the time first. Okay. So I have at least 15 minutes before I need to go. So Philippe, shall we take some questions?
Okay, I got one question from Pavel. What kind of strategies for girls have you now in the USA?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What kind of strategies for help to your girls?
Oh, to help now?
Yeah, to help now in the USA.
Yeah. Well, listen, first of all, let me stop this. I'll share it again later, but that way I can see more of you. Actually, it'd be nice if your videos were on. I'd love to see more of you. Just so I'm not talking to gray boxes. Okay, so, I don't have a good answer for that. My daughter's 24. There's really nothing, I think, beyond what we're all doing, physical therapy and speech therapy and trying to have them eat healthy. But there's no special diet. There's no drug that I would recommend. So, the truth is that I don't think there's, we're not clinically treating our children any different now than we were 10 or 15 years ago, I think. I mean, I know that's a sad thing to say, but I think it's the truth. So until we find something that addresses the root cause of the disorder, I don't think we have much to offer besides things that we're all doing, various therapies, trying to stimulate our daughters, keep them engaged and stimulated with therapies and school and activities and being part of their community.
Okay. I don't know, maybe we got some time now. Maybe I can ask you the question that I sent you before, okay?
Yes.
So, the first question is, does the drug which is designed, which is now being designed by Novartis and Taisha, will be for all defects in MECP2 region?
Yes. They should address any mutation. It doesn't matter. It should be kind of a generic approach to treating Rett syndrome.
Okay, so the second one,
although you do have to have a documented MECP2 mutation. So a clinical diagnosis of Rett without an MECP2 mutation is not enough. So
yes.
You have to have
okay, the result of the gene gene tests. Yes, okay. Okay, and the second question is also, can the drug cure the girls completely or just stop the disease from progressing?
Well, that is the big question that we will not have an answer to until we do the clinical trial.
Yeah, I think so.
But I will give you my feelings on that, okay? And so first of all, the Novartis and Taysha, clinical trials will be the first ones that are done. I think we will learn a tremendous amount from them, especially about how well the gene replacement product is delivered to the brain, okay? But they will not be the last trials. I think, we will have more to come, and I think this will be kind of an iterative process. I don't think the first trial is going to be a 100% cure and we're finished. I wish that was the case. I don't think that will be the case. I think there will be improvements and there will be different ways of attacking this problem. And, gene replacement is the closest thing that we have to the clinic. And given how serious Rett syndrome is, I think it can't get to the clinic fast enough. Like, I really want to see this start. However, when I look at the big picture of all the different therapeutics that are being pursued, a more elegant approach is to really fix the mutation that's there, because then you don't run into any problems with potential of having too much MECP2 in any cell. And also, while we are delivering the gene, we can't deliver all of the regulatory DNA that goes along with that gene. And so when you're editing the gene that's already there, you don't have to deliver all the regulatory pieces because they're already in the cell. So it's a more elegant approach. And so in the long term, longer term, I think DNA editing, RNA editing, MECP2 reactivation, may be more elegant approaches than gene replacement. However, we don't have the the luxury of waiting, right? I mean, our children are suffering now, and I think we need to, it may be that gene replacement is great and enough. We'll see. But the gene replacement, so the way you get genes into the brain is by putting them into what's called a vector, which is like a Trojan horse, right? It's the delivery mechanism. And the gold standard for delivering genes to the brain is a vector called AAV9. And that's what Novartis is using. And there's some variations of different AAV9s, but that's really what works the best right now. Now, there's a lot of effort by lots of labs and lots of companies looking for vectors to deliver to the brain better than AAV9. And again, I think in time, that will happen. We will have something better than AAV9. AAV9 is not going to get to every cell in the brain. There will be some parts of the brain where it's 5, 10, 15%. There may be other parts of the brain where it's 20%. I think it's enough to have improvements and maybe dramatic improvements, but it's not going to get to every cell. But in time, I think we will have something that gets even better than AAV9. So I think, you know, and then the other question is, you know, my daughter's 24. I'm not expecting gene therapy to cure her at 24 years old. But I do have an expectation, given the animal work and what we know about Rett syndrome in the animal models, I have an expectation that she can have dramatic improvements in many of her symptoms. You know, I don't expect a 100% cure, like Rett syndrome never happened. I think that's a lot to ask for someone who's 24. But I have expectations, and I think those are realistic, that we can have dramatic improvements.
Okay, that was also one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Will the gene therapy will be available only for very young children as the therapy for the SMA from Novartis? And what with the adults and the children, the older children suffering for Rett? But I think that you already answered this question, or you.
Well, let me just say a few
something
more things.
else?
I think common sense tells us that the earliest we can intervene, the better. So ideally, you know, if we had a gene replacement that works, it's already been shown to work. What I envision would happen is that children, as soon as they're born, would be tested. And if they test positive for an MECP2 mutation, they would get the gene replacement, and those children hopefully would never have any symptoms. So I think the sooner you can intervene, the better. However, the fact that Rett syndrome is not degenerative and brain cells are not dying, and the fact that in animal models, you know, we can see this recovery of dramatic reversal of all of the symptoms, gives us hope that it's never too late to have improvements. So I think the companies will probably want to do their trials in younger children that maybe have better chances of dramatic improvement, but it will also be in their best interest economically and also ethically to also do trials after that first trial has been done for older kids. And that gives them a larger population of patients. So economically, that's a good thing, but it's also the right thing to do because our older children and adults need treatments as well.
Yeah, correct. Okay. And the main question that all people are taking about when we can accept the cure. You said that in the 2024 it can be a cure, but
no, I didn't say there'll be a cure in 2024. I said there'll be clinical trials.
Clinical trials.
Well, hold on. So the Novartis trials hopefully will start this year. They will be making an announcement this month, an update. They'll give us an update. We know that they're in negotiations with the FDA. And so if Novartis gets to a trial this year, you know, maybe 2024, 2025, maybe there'll be something commercialized and available. All of the other things that you saw in that pipeline, they will be in trials in 2024. So you need time to do the trial, analyze the data, and go from there.
Okay, and
I can't give you a date of because it would,
I know
it would be a guess. And you know, I'm a parent too. I never want to mislead other parents. I believe in being very transparent and honest with you. I can tell you that at RSRT we're pursuing every possible strategy. We're constantly doing outreach to companies, to scientists, trying to recruit new people in the field, and leaving no stone unturned. So, but it's hard to give you a date because we haven't seen any clinical trials yet. I think you need to have some data before you can start talking about dates.
Yeah, and do you know when Taisha want to start the clinical trials? Because I also read that they want to start in 2021.
Well, they so what their website says and their press releases have said that they plan to submit the application to the FDA to start a trial by the end of 2021. So that would mean at the earliest, the trial would start in 2022.
Okay. Okay, and one more question. Do you have any predictions about the price for the cure?
Well, I don't know. I can tell you it. I mean, in the U.S., it will be expensive. Our drug prices are always more expensive in the U.S. So the other Novartis drug that is available for spinal muscular atrophy costs $2.1 million. And I know that sounds like a ridiculously, huge amount of money, and it is. But if you look at the other treatment options that are available for that disease, they have to be given every 4 months for life. The first one costs $300,000, and every subsequent injection is $100,000. So you're going to get to 2.1 million pretty quickly. And so when you compare it, now nobody is expecting parents to come up with $2.1 million. The company negotiates with insurance companies and with the, depending on the country and what the healthcare system is like. So in the US, we have private insurance, and then we have state insurance, Medicaid. And they would be negotiating with the government and with the insurance company. So by the time they announce that they have approval and the drug is commercial, those negotiations ideally have already happened. And so the drug becomes available to people and the insurance companies pay. So nobody's expecting families to come up with the money. I think in time, the thing with gene replacement is it costs a lot of money to manufacture. It's very laborious. You need very specialized equipment. I think in time, the technology will get better and better, and it'll become cheaper and cheaper to make. And so the price will fall. I also think competition is good. So if you have 4 companies that all have gene replacement, that's going to drive the price down, which I think is good. And if you have other strategies, DNA editing, RNA editing, protein replacement, that will also drive the price down. But these are one-time injections. And so the company has to be able to recoup its research and development costs, given the fact that it's not ongoing treatment like taking a pill for the rest of your life, right? So it has to be a different economic structure that's put in place to be able to support that kind of research and development.
Okay. So I don't know, it's 11:46.
So I'm waiting for a text for when I have to jump on the call with the doctor.
Okay.
So until then, we can keep talking if you like. And when I go, Tim is going to share his screen, and he's going to just talk to you a little bit about where the money comes from RSRT and talk to you a little bit about that. But maybe people can either put their questions in the chat, or they can unmute themselves and ask a question if they have one. And if there are no questions, then Tim can just start.
So I may have a question. Okay, I'm Krzysztof. I'm a physician. So my question would be simple: whether there is a way that we can prepare ourselves as physicians taking care of Rett girls, together with the parental support group, for the future clinical trials, or set the starting points in terms of clinics of our girls, and so on and so on. So how would you actually see the role of parental group together with physicians taking care for the girls back in our country?
Okay. Well, first of all, maybe a step back and think about what does it take to get a gene replacement, or any of the things that we discussed today, actually approved in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. I had a recent conversation with the head of regulatory affairs, so the department at Novartis that's in charge of getting things approved. And so basically the thought process is that there are two regulatory bodies in the world that have the most stringent criteria to get a drug approved. That's the FDA, Food and Drug Administration in the US, and the EMA, European Medical, I forget what it stands for, agency, maybe, the EMA, so the FDA counterpart in Europe. For drugs, you know, pills, drugs that are pills that you take every day or whatever, typically you have to do trials in different countries. So if something gets approved in the US, you still have to do trials in different countries in order to get it approved in Europe. For something like gene therapy, these are trials that tend to be very small, that target the root cause of the disease, that are quite expensive to do. Although this is a new field, and so the rules are not completely ironed out yet. I mean, this is a very dynamic area because it's new still. But the thought is that you don't have to do trials in every country or you know, in Europe necessarily, and that if the FDA approves it, typically the AMA would look at that data and potentially make a decision about whether to approve it or not, or the other way around. If it's done in Europe, that the FDA would look at that data. And the same thing applies to Asia and South America and so on and so forth. So hopefully the data that is generated by the first trial will be applicable to the other countries. And then, you know, the procedure for at least the Novartis trial is an intrathecal injection. So as you know, it's not too complicated. It's not like something that has to be given directly into the brain. So yes, there will be clinics, I suspect, set up. And it'd be interesting to see who in Poland, for example, is administering Zolgensma for spinal muscular atrophy. Where do you practice, the Dr. Christoph, the doctor that just...
I actually practice at the Warsaw Medical University. So it's part of it for adult neurology and for children neurology, for pediatric neurology, has already dealt with Zolgensma. So
okay. So you're probably already set up.
Yeah, but my question is really whether we should clinically somehow prepare the girls. So we should establish starting points, or for clinical trials to be available. We already will know that, for example, for phase 1 of the disease of the syndrome, we do have a treatment available. So we start with the girls in phase 1 of the syndrome, right?
But are you suggesting that there would be a gene replacement clinical trial in Poland? Is that what you're? Okay.
No, I'm not saying that. No.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Okay, so there's no way that we are preparing for clinical trials that are actually set abroad outside of our country, right? What we may actually look into would be try and set the clinical trial in Poland, right?
I doubt there will be a clinical trial for Novartis in Poland.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And there doesn't need to be. You know, there's a lot of countries in the world. If we needed to do a clinical trial in every country, we would never get this approved. So I think there may be, you know, I think there'll be one trial in the US. There may be one, Novartis may decide to do a trial somewhere in Europe, and they may decide to, in parallel, you know, do a European trial and a US trial, or just a US trial. I don't know yet. And then once it's approved, then it's having access to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. So let me see these questions. So one of the questions I'm seeing in the chat. No, I think there will be a trial in the US. That's the goal. Novartis is talking to the FDA. So we'll see where that goes. What will be the conditions to take part in the treatment? Should we be part? By treatment, do you mean this is Monica. By treatment, do you mean the trial or do you mean once it's available?
I mean when it's available already.
So I think once it's available, I think the question will be the age range, at least in the US. I can't speak for Europe that much, but in the US, let's say that the trial tests 4 to 10. I'm just making that number up, okay? 4 to 10. And it's wonderful. It dramatic improvements, it gets approved. I suspect that insurance companies and government agencies like Medicaid will pay for children to have gene replacement 4 to 10 years old. If it hasn't been tested in a 15 or a 20-year-old, they will probably say, we're not going to pay for it because we don't know if it works. And so then I'm assuming the Novartis and other companies will want to do trials that cover different age groups. Because really it comes down to money at that point. In terms of insurance companies, these will be expensive, and so they'll try not to pay. And so does that make sense?
Yes, exactly.
Then there's a question here about girls, or will it also work for boys? I think there will probably need to be a clinical trial for boys. Because it's really a different, the disease progresses differently in boys than it does in girls. And I think there will need to be a trial. That's my opinion, though. I don't know for sure. Okay. Tim, do you want to share your screen?
Hi, everyone. It's how great that you have such a large group here. I understand Philippe and Jennifer, you organized this. That's terrific. Nice to see everyone, and I saw some of your daughters too. They're very cute. So my name is Tim. I have an 11-year-old daughter with Rett syndrome, and I've been working with Monica and RSRT for almost 8 years. My role is to raise funds to make this research happen, but really, I don't raise funds. It's Rett families that raise funds. My role is to help Rett families do that in any way that I can. So if you take nothing from what I say today, remember only this, that to raise funds and make this research happen, it requires Rett families taking action. It requires their effort and energy. There is no, in the US in English, we have a phrase called a magic bullet. And a magic bullet means that some big company or foundation will come in and fund all this research. And there is no magic bullet for Rett research.
Tim, can I just make one comment just so that we're clear? Once a company like Novartis takes over a program, they pay for the program. We're not giving Novartis any money. They're the second largest pharmaceutical company in the world. But the goal for us is to incubate and transition as many programs as we possibly can. Okay, because the goal is to have as many shots on goal, as many opportunities to get to a clinical trial and see if something works. Some things may work, some things may not work. I think the best thing that we can do is in parallel as many programs as possible. Once it gets to a company, they typically pay themselves for the program to continue. I just wanted to be clear about that.
So I want to give you a little bit of background on where funding comes from, how those funds are raised. So what this first slide here shows is all philanthropic dollars, all donated dollars, contributed to all causes, and this is in the U.S. So all causes being education, healthcare, religion, the environment. So in 2019, $450 billion were given away. And what's often so surprising to people is how small a piece of the pie are foundations and companies, corporations. So 4% came from corporations, 17% from foundations. Individual and family donors accounted for nearly 80% of all of that funding. And so the question that flows from that is this true also for RSRT, for Rett research? And you can see here that it's very much true. In fact, it's even more so true. The corporations accounted for just 4% of our funding, foundations 7%. The vast majority of our funding to RSRT comes from people, from us, from parents, from extended family, and from their networks, very importantly. So this next slide shows what percentage of dollars that come to us come from Rett families and their networks. And you can see that virtually every dollar comes to us from Rett families and their networks. That is to say that we got no, what I would call random donations from someone who's not connected in some way to Rett syndrome. And that is not unique or special to Rett syndrome. I've spoken with the people who have my same job at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and at the Angelman Syndrome Foundation. And the very same is true for them. The funding raised for research on those diseases comes from the families that are affected by those diseases and their networks. So how did we raise that funding? Or what methods did we use? So this slide shows that 45% of our funding came from events, 40% came from major contributions where we asked people for donations, and 10% came from crowdfunding. And I will add that about 15% of our funding over the last 3 years has come from international sources, from international organizations, and from families around the world, not in the U.S., who are crowdfunding, who are doing fundraising for us. So, with COVID, we're in a very different fundraising environment than we were just a year ago. I believe that events are going to be less of a factor in our fundraising in the future. We had a number of events that were canceled or postponed in the spring and summer. We did do some virtual events that worked quite well. So really going forward, the best way, the most effective way for families to raise funds internationally from anywhere in the world is using our crowdfunding platform, which is called Rett Give. These are personalized campaigns with each family sending out their campaign to their own network. And they're quite effective. And also families raise funds on Facebook. So I hope all of you will consider helping us by doing this. This is how funds come to us and how funds advance the research. And I can even show you, if I can pull it up. This is Rett Give, which is our platform fundraising, for crowdfunding. And I encourage all of you to take a look at it. It's retgive.org. And when you're there, go to Explore, and you can see examples of campaigns that families set up. And once they set them up, they send them out to their network, and their networks are of friends and extended family and colleagues are often very eager to help, to donate funds. And you can see each of these campaigns is personalized. There's a photo, a goal, a dollar goal that is personalized for each campaign, and a short description of why this family is doing this campaign, and a spot for people to make their donations. So if we have all of your emails, I will, after the call, I'll send all of you instructions for how to set up one of these, your own campaign. And it's very easy to do. Actually, I set it up for you. All you need to do is email me, respond to a number of questions that I'll send you, send me a couple of photos and a very short paragraph or two, which you can write in any language or in more than one language. And then once I have your materials, it takes me a day or two to set up your campaign, and I send you a link. And then you, once you have the link, you can send out your campaign to your network. And I suspect they'd be very supportive. So this is a great way to help us speed this research towards what we all want for our
well, I don't know. I've never had a conversation with Philippe or the other leadership of the Polish organization. I don't know if you're actively fundraising at the national level in Poland. Another way would be to, fundraise locally and then help support the work that RSRT is doing. There's a German organization that helps us, and an Israeli. And Philippe, maybe you can make sure that everybody has my email address and Tim's email address.
Yeah,
and Jennifer too.
I will respond to Pavel, and we will send it to every people that are in the Polish Association. We send your email, and
if you have questions about the research, about what RSRT is doing, about anything, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everybody. It was wonderful to be able to talk to so many people. I hope 2021 is good to you, to all of us. We all need peace, and yeah, it's a crazy world we live in right now. So, and best wishes to your children.
Okay, best wishes for you too. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this meeting. I hope that we start doing such meetings, maybe, I don't know, two times a year or something.
We can do that. We can do updates, or when there's big news that, that needs some explaining. Yes, happy to do that.
Yeah, also I spoke with Pavel to do some action to fundraising your foundation. Maybe we find some solution to make some action. I don't know, because as you said, the times are difficult. We cannot do some kind of events because in Poland we have a lockdown at this moment. And
but that's why crowdfunding is so easy. You set it up and you send an email to people and the donations come in. It's so easy. 100% goes to research. You don't have to do any of the work. Tim sets it up. It's really very simple, and it's very effective.
If any of you want to do a crowdfunding campaign on RedGive, all you need to do, once you have my email, all you need to do is email me and say, I want to do a campaign, and I will send you the instructions. It's that easy.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.